Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The prospects for peace in Ukraine face new uncertainty after Florida talks between President Zelenskyy and Trump amid Russian claims of a drone attack on Putin's residence. Ukraine denies the attack, warning it is a tactic to undermine negotiations. Meanwhile, the US has offered Kyiv just 15 years of security guarantees, while Russian losses continue to mount faster than ever. Joining us is David Dunn, a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham, to discuss the implications for peace, US support and Russia's evolving military stance. Professor Dunn, welcome to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to be here.
Right, so let's start with the talks in Florida between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy. Your thoughts on the output of those talks?
Well, these talks are largely designed to placate Trump in his desire to bring the fighting to a conclusion as soon as possible, and on the part of the Europeans and the Ukrainians, that they're keen to make sure that that's not done on any terms, and therefore what these have been about is demonstrating a willingness to make a whole lot of concessions up to the point of the important red lines, to actually show willing to the Americans and to try and force the Russians to either meet them halfway or to declare that they are not going to do so, in the hope that that will make the Americans put pressure on the Russians. But the concern of all the parties, and from a Western perspective and a non-American perspective, is that Trump is more inclined to put pressure on Ukraine rather than Russia, partly because it's easier to pressure your allies than it is your enemies. And there is a marked reluctance on the part of the Trump administration to follow through on his rhetorical threats of doing things against the Russians. For example, the much talked about Tomahawk cruise missiles, or indeed stronger sanctions. So it's a diplomatic performativity that's involved in here, to try and keep the Americans sweet without necessarily being on the cusp of a major agreement.
Diplomatic performance or not, I mean, you know, the feedback at the end of that meeting, from Zelenskyy was, he said it's 95% done. Trump said it was a terrific meeting. Ursula von der Leyen said, we're close to some sort of agreement. Very good. There seems to have been some movement, doesn't there, in the right direction?
Well, there is, and there's 20 points, and many of those 20 points have reached agreement of some sort or other, even if the details are yet to be clear. But the remaining 5 or 10% are huge differences that there seem to be unbridgeable. The whole question of allowing Western troops into Ukraine is a non-starter as far as Russia is concerned. Russia has a maximalist desire for the Donbass. The idea of Russia withdrawing from the area that it is illegally occupied is a non-starter. The Zaporizhzhia power plant issue is not anywhere near resolution. These are not trivial things, and until they are resolved, and it's difficult to see how they can be resolved, there will be no agreement.
Right. Well, I mean, to throw some more confusion into the scene, Putin is saying that 91 drones were fired at one of his residences by Ukraine. Of course, President Zelenskyy denies that ever happened. What do you think happened?
Well, first of all, in international law, they're perfectly legal to target his residence. The leadership target is a legitimate target. But the Ukrainians would have been silly to do that at this particular moment in time, and there is no evidence that they did so. And in fact, what this is, very clearly, I think, is an effort by the Russians to actually play the herd party and to derail the momentum towards an agreement between the Ukrainians and the Americans in a way in which they would agree things things and then put pressure on Russia. The interesting thing here is that Trump took the phone call. Just because the phone rings doesn't mean to say you have to answer it. And actually, in terms of the negotiation process, it was a mistake to do so. And also, actually, the Americans have technical means of working out whether there were any drones near the residence of Putin near the lake. And they have not said that there was one way or the other. And part of the problem there is that Trump doesn't listen to his own bureaucracy. He doesn't take reports from the Pentagon, from his National Security Council, from the intelligence community. He relies instead on his chosen friends, most of whom have a background in real estate rather than in diplomacy. And he actually clearly made a statement on TV without checking whether actually the allegations made by the Russians had any substance to them at all. So I think that shows us the difficulty of who we're dealing with and the ease with which the Russians play the American puppet through their skillful diplomacy.
Indeed. I mean, how would you characterize, I mean, you mentioned earlier it's easier to pressure an ally than an enemy, but I mean, does Trump see Putin as an enemy, or is it, does he see this as a transactional opportunity?
Well, I think
Go on.
Yeah, increasingly he does. Increasingly, again, the very skillful Russian diplomacy dangles baubles in front of Trump, which he happily snatches up. The Russians were very clever in the way in which they scuppered European Union plans to seize the Russian assets that were frozen in Belgium by saying, if these assets aren't taken by the Europeans and given to the Ukrainians, then you can have some of the profits of the way in which they're spent on joint projects. So by dangling commercial opportunities in front of the Americans, they're distracted from the bigger picture. Unfortunately, the bigger picture, as far as Trump is concerned, is commercial opportunities rather than European security, international law, or the precedent of non-intervention.
Indeed. Now, you touched earlier on boots on the ground, American boots on the ground and so on. But in terms of security guarantees, clearly, I mean, Russia's been dug its feet in, its heels in, saying we're not going to have any boots on the ground, otherwise we'll consider it an act of war. What does Ukraine want, and does it have any chance of getting it?
Well, what Ukraine wants is for an end to Russian aggression and the best deal possible, and security guarantees to prevent the Russians from having a pause and coming back again. And what that means is meaningful security guarantees and either no limitations on its ability to defend itself in terms of actually being as close to the front line as possible as the forces are at present, receiving Western arms, not limiting the size of its army, and if in the absence of that, a buffer zone with meaningful military forces from the West as a tripwire to stop and deter the Russians from attacking again. But those things, which are crucial to Ukraine's future security and indeed to European security, are unlikely to be agreeable to the Russians, who actually want the opposite. They want the conquest of Ukraine and the opportunity in the future to come back again and have another nibble, in the same way that they first of all came from the Crimea and then 10 years later came back for the eastern parts of Ukraine.
Right. Well, quite. And we shall see how that works out and whether Europe will be able to step into the breach there if Trump doesn't. Because we do, after all, have the coalition of the willing, who say that they are ready to at least put boots on the ground. Just in the last minute or so that we have left, Professor, I want to ask about the concessions in terms of Ukrainian territory. Russia wants Ukraine to give up the territory that it is still currently occupying and give the Donbass region to Russia. Is there some kind of compromise available with that sticking point?
Well, what the Ukrainians have said is, okay, if you think this is necessary for your security, we're prepared to demilitarize that zone and make it a free economic area, provided you do the same thing in the part of the Donetsk area that you have occupied. If you're really concerned, if your concerns are about there being military forces there, we can demilitarize it.
Right.
But again, what you find is the Russians aren't interested in that because they want to occupy as much of Ukraine as possible.
Well, I think that is fairly clear from their behaviour over the last 4 years. Professor Dunn, thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight, and have a happy 2026.
And same to you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.